there's a big input that's missing in this.
Customer.
There you go. Okay,
Customer.
the customer. Okay, the traditional model is internally focused. Okay, we don't necessarily talk about the customer, and modifying this, okay, in terms of adding phases, elements, is often in response to an internal need, not an external need. External being the marketplace. Okay. And what happens with this structure? One of the issues is you're adding complexity, but you're adding complexity trying to fix a problem, but you haven't identified what the problem is. Okay. One problem might be it's not fast enough. Okay. So why it's not fast enough? It's because probably we forgot to do something. We'll add it in the process. Okay. So trying to do the good thing sometimes by improving the process actually slows it down, right? Because instead of focusing on really what's not working, we're fixing the symptoms, not the actual problem. Okay. So that's the basic model. And within the traditional model, you also understand that when you get to production, sometimes that's where some of the bugs come out, the problems with products. You have to go back, redesign it, changing features. So you're capturing some of those things later on in the process, and you need to go back in the traditional model. Here's another element with the traditional model. We have the different phases at the bottom, okay, and the cost related to those phases. What comes to mind when you're looking at this? What rings a bell?
I've never worked on a product that we didn't have change.
Okay. The key thing here is as you're moving along in the phases, if you've missed something, okay, the cost is much higher. Okay, because you're considering that everything's been done before, so you don't need to worry about it. You hope everything's been covered. Okay, so if you hit a snag in the development stage, okay, that's related to the problem definition of the design. You've already done all this work, spent all this time, these resources, that you need to go back. So you're going to spend all this money again trying to fix your problem. And that's why in the traditional model, what happens, people will say, well, we missed something, so we'll add another box within that phase. Okay. So instead of trying to figure out where the problem was, they'll add another step. So you're making your process even more costly. Now, in an agile environment, this is what we can expect. What do you see here in terms of differences?
Startup cost is much higher,
Yeah. Okay.
but it doesn't grow exponentially.
Exactly. So the agile philosophy is that you're going to be, like you said, okay, you're going to start sooner, okay, except that you're going to be able to, what was it you mentioned?
I had said figure things out
As you go along.
which is less upfront work.
There you go. That's our
Number 4. Higher.
here we go. Less upfront work. So this is really what that describes. Okay. You start sooner, off you go, but your process means that if you haven't done all the pre-work, it doesn't matter, your process will be able to adapt to it. Okay. Comment, John?
Yeah. For for change here, we're talking about both bug fixes and additional features, I guess, feature enhancements? Or is it
Yes.
strictly- Okay.
It could also be understanding the customer requirements.
Okay. I guess this is good as long as you know ahead of time what a lot of the features will be,
Correct.
even though you may not implement them. Because I'm just thinking of, and maybe this is more of a too low level software development problem, is that if a change requires a major architectural rework, then this doesn't bode true. But if it's, you know, you need another button or a different flow or something within the existing framework, then sure, this makes sense.
The idea is, let's say you're designing software, you're using the traditional model, then when you get to the test, okay, if you haven't, if you do all your testing and everything works, okay, but you figure out that you've been working on the wrong problem, okay, it's working, but that's not what the customer wanted, you have to go back to the definition stage. While in the agile environment, okay, you do the test, show it to the customer.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not what you wanted. Sorry. Let's go back over here.
Yeah.
Okay. But the cost curve is not necessarily as steep.
So I think, John, what you're saying, what your concern is you could have that issue in both cases,
Yes.
but the idea would be to fail faster in agile.
Okay, fair enough.
Because I do think that is a valid concern about winging it,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm exaggerating when I'm saying winging it. There has to be some upfront thought that you would probably discover your issue sooner.
Failing faster is yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Fail fast, fail early.
Yeah, because even in agile, if you map in the release and production, it gets very expensive.
Yes.
When you go that way anyway, right?
True.
So,
True. Yeah, I mean, this is an exaggerated, you know,
yeah.
cost curve, obviously. Right?
Yeah.
And I would suggest that in software development, if you have an architectural issue, you're gonna figure out in development anyways, you know, like when they get to unit testing or some phase of, hey, this doesn't glue together, doesn't work, doesn't, but still. You have a system with agile which is geared to dealing with that better than the other one, which is, oh shit, what do we do? We've got to change the
Yeah.
requirement docs. And
Yeah. Okay.
So this is the agile product process. Okay. See, what's the first thing that you see compared to the traditional model? If you look at in your books, you can compare.
Design, develop, test is gone. So this white box defined.
Yep. Some of those phases all of a sudden don't appear. Not that they don't exist, they're just not there. Okay, something's happened. And also notice that some of the things that we see in the traditional model are still there though. Okay, so we haven't thrown out everything. Okay, what we've done is we've actually looked at part of the process. And this is one of the key things about, and that goes back to that little humor cartoon, is that agile focuses on part of the process. Okay, agile is not the whole process. Okay, and as an organization, as a product manager, you have to be aware of the fact that agile just focuses on part of your activities. And it's not all-encompassing. Although some people, I would say, preach all-encompassing, in reality, it's not quite the case. Okay? For instance, an agile accounting department, right? That would be an interesting concept. What would that be, right? So when we talk about product management, when it comes to ideation, screening, in terms of the output, the beta, the production, the launch planning, launch support, some of these things are still there, okay? And some of these things will still require documentation, right? Because they're not part of the agile philosophy in terms of fixing a specific problem related to development. Okay? So agile really focuses on the development of products, what we traditionally, in the traditional model, would maybe call research and development, okay, and design. So that's where we need to remember that, okay. This is where things are focused on. Those middle boxes, okay, have been replaced by an agile process.
If you go back to the previous slide, just because it's a bit cleaner, I would say that the ideation process, maybe there is a formal gate in the company's process, but it keeps on, from a product manager, as you're seeing your product perform, you really have your customer in the loop, the ideation process keeps on.
Yes, that's right, that's right.
Which is, if anything, an advantage, and it's definitely much better than before, where you meet your customer, you have a nice conversation, and then you come back 9 months after.
Actually, the ideation, talking to customers is an ongoing process.
Yeah, and I'll throw, because I've had a couple of coffees, your ideation, you now have everybody in your development team on board with the ideation, because you're talking about those ideas, and you've got the customer in the loop and all that, so that's, should be a strong point.
Yeah, there's the idea of a community behind that, and we're gonna take a look at that, right? And in the traditional model, basically, the idea is, I do part of the work, okay? John, it's now your part, okay? You do your thing, then you pass it on to
We
Jean-Francois.
call it throwing it over the fence.
Right, literally, that's it.
nice what you're doing there. You just,
Yeah, and those are the gates, you know, the gate,
yeah.
okay, that's what it is, literally, visually, it's a gate, like, there you go. I can throw it over the gate, so it's
And
not.
it's really, we did the best we could at it.
There we go,
You
there we
take
go.
it from here.
There we go, and it's a one-way street, right?
Figure it
It's a
out.
one-way gate, no, there
Do
you
you,
go.
is that something you relate to, John, or is that how?
Yeah, I think maybe it sometimes comes down to the culture and size of organizations,
Yeah.
because, I think I've worked in development teams that work across continents,
Mhm.
and so there it really is almost throwing it over the wall or over the fence, because maybe the cultures are not compatible, or there's just a physical difference. But when the groups work in the same building, in the same, on the same floor, it's much more collaborative. It's not throwing it over the thing. It's, if you throw it over at me, I'm gonna be in your cubicle in 10 minutes and asking you, well, what's going on? So
Yeah.
It could go either way, in my opinion. These,
That's good.
the cycles you have on this slide here that go in the white box, are those what are called agile sprints? Okay.
Well, those are iterations.
Okay.
The whole thing is a sprint.
The whole thing is a sprint, okay.
And we'll go through those details.
Yeah. I pick up all the terms when I read, and then I'm not quite sure what the term means, so.
You brought up something which we're gonna talk about later. Proximity. That's a very important thing in Agile. I'm using it in terms of the French definition, proximity. Okay, so hopefully it translates into the same thing in English. So Agile really, the point I want to make here is Agile focuses on part of the process, okay? And when we talk about the fact that there are a lot of hybrid situations, there's an Agile process, there's a waterfall process, but really, if you look at reality, these things are blended together.